So far, 2023 is proving to be a very different year for Paladins. We've had the return of an old game mode, feedback surveys in regards to balance, the first lore short story since 2019, and, in a very pleasant change of pace, the Paladins team has graced us with a mid-patch balance update. That's right, we're getting additional balance added for the Emergence update, and I'm here to leave my feedback. Though small in size, this update has some massive changes. Not all of them are winners though. Let's start with Azan. The lockout time after using Deliverance is being lowered from 1.6 to 1.3 seconds. I think this is a very nice quality of life change. Despite having a strong base kit, Azan's ultimate feels incredibly weak. Oftentimes the lockout will get you killed, so it's nice to see that being reduced. I still think the ultimate should have some added utility like a slow on the second slam. Baby steps though. Next is Buck, who is getting an ammo increase to his shotgun, going from 5 to 6. Though Buck can be a very pub-stompy champion, I think this is a fair change. 5 ammo was just awkward to play around with. Besides, 6 shots is kind of the standard in most video games, like TF2 for example. Next is Cassie, with a ton of unneeded buffs. The first one is to the crossbow's fire rate. Instead of firing once per 0.75 seconds, it will now fire once every 0.65 seconds. The disengage's damage is being upped from 200 to 300, and its cooldown is being lowered from 12 to 11 seconds. The ultimate Scout will now also increase your fire rate by 20% while it's active. The only change I like from this set is the increased fire rate during Scout, as it adds a bit of oomph to the ultimate. The buffs to disengage are not needed, and the buff to the base fire rate is definitely not needed. Cassie is one of the starter damage champions, and is easy for anyone to pick up and play. Even though she has a low skill floor, the character can still output great damage. The devs even acknowledge this in their little explanation blurb, saying that, statistically, she deals a lot of damage compared to all other champions. So why on earth is she getting a massive damage increase? Well, apparently Cassie has a below average win rate, sitting at 47 to 48%. Now, obviously I don't have access to the internal Paladin statistics, but I would like to once again state that Cassie is one of the starter champions, and that could be a reason for her low win rate. I do also want to state that I believe player perception should be taken into account when balancing, and the majority of player perception is that Cassie is and was always a good pick. If it wasn't Leon, Cassie was always picked in my ranked games for her consistency and burst damage. I do also find the devs out of touch in the fact that they're trying to buff Cassie's damage, but don't even acknowledge her BS burst combo by clicking 2 buttons at the same time. I wonder if these damage buffs are due to the ongoing Haven veteran meta. Next up is Caspian, who is getting clobbered with nerfs. The first set of nerfs affects 7 of his cards. All of the cards on screen will no longer proc off of non-player entities. This ties in with the weaker Rogue's Tempo from the Measured Cadence talent, no longer triggering any of Caspian's cards. On top of that, Caspian can no longer gain momentum stacks from hitting non-player entities. I want to say that I agree with the nerf to Measured Cadence. I think the weaker Rogue's Tempo proccing cards easily made this talent outshine Caspian's other options. The decision to remove Caspian's benefits from hitting non-player entities is one that I'm not a fan of. Vora is another character who gains power from hitting her primary, and she doesn't have to face the same restriction Caspian does, nor should she. I just think this nerf is a bit overkill for Caspian, especially since the power of his momentum passive has been massively lowered. The attack speed bonus from both piercing and sharp momentum have been lowered from a 5% bonus to a 2% bonus per stack. However, the base fire rates of Love and War have been increased to compensate. Even though I think this is a fair change, I didn't really like the feel of Caspian's weapon in the PTS. One of the power moments of current Caspian is when your normally sluggish weapons start spitting out attack after attack with your stacks capped. While stats-wise the base fire rate buff is better for overall DPS, it doesn't really feel that impactful once you start gaining stacks. Before we move on, I want to bring special attention to the Finer Things, which is arguably Caspian's best card. This is the card that grants Caspian move speed after hitting something with the gun. Besides the non-player entity nerf mentioned earlier, this card had an additional shadow nerf at the start of the patch, with the duration going down from 3 to 1 second, which was a massive blow to Caspian's rhythm. The reason that this is Caspian's best card is because it grants him access to his best mobility, as his actual mobility skill is the worst in the game. Previously, the card had two great uses: poking from afar with your gun and using the massive move speed boost to get in close like an actual flank should, and second was proccing the move speed bonus in the middle of sword combos to keep your movement unpredictable. With the nerf to the uptime, both of these strategies have been neutered. I would like to state that I would absolutely be fine with the nerfs to this card and all the Caspian changes presented here, if he had an actual movement skill. I had an idea, and it's kinda crazy, but hear me out. You know how Caspian's movement skill is called Deadly Momentum? Well, what if, and stay with me here, what if the movement skill actually carried your momentum? In all seriousness, you know this ability is bad when you get stunned in the middle of it, and get more distance than the normal version. Man, if only Deadly Momentum was like that, Caspian would be a good character. Next are some buffs from my boy Janos. We'd love to see it. Astromark's cooldown is being lowered from 7 to 6 seconds. The duration is going from 10 to 12 seconds, and the initial burst heal is going up from 330 to 450. Additionally, the cooldown on Stellar Wind is being lowered from 2 to 1 second. I really like these changes. One problem with Janos is that it feels like you need to invest at least half of your loadout points into Astromark to make it more reliable. Now with the cooldown and duration buffs, Janos players will have more loadout flexibility, or alternatively, can keep their loadouts as is to supercharge their marks to the max. Despite liking what's presented, I don't think these changes fix Janos' main problem, which is his lack of utility. Since the Luminary rework, Janos has lost a lot of power. They have been slowly giving him some power back through buffs to the Astromark, but healing only goes so far in this game, since Cauterize is so prevalent. Still, I will take any buffs for Janos that I could get my hands on. I don't think this will suddenly make Janos more popular, but it will certainly make him better to play with. Next is Cassie with a slight rework to the Empowered Curse talent. The old talent would boost attack speed and movement speed per stack of Curse. Now the attack speed boost is being replaced with a 3% ult charge gain rate buff per stack of Curse. I think this is a fair change and will make the talent less frustrating to face. I still think Cassie needs a rework though. I actually uploaded a Cassie rework concept last week. Feel free to check it out by hitting the card on screen. Next is Khan, with buffs, surprisingly. The heavy repeater's damage is being upped from 190 per shot to 210 per shot. The battle shot's cooldown is being lowered from 14 to 12 seconds, and the heal is being increased from 1100 to 1350. Even though I enjoy playing Khan, I personally don't think he needed buffs. The devs state that Khan struggles as a frontline to make an impact compared to the rest of the cast, which is a sentiment I completely disagree on. In Ranked, Khan was arguably the most impactful champion in the game. An off-tank with great damage and amazing displacement with the ability to heal his team in a pinch? That's pretty impactful. In Ranked, Khan was a very popular champion to play. If he wasn't banned, that is. The only buff I agree with here is the buff to the battle shot's cooldown, as that will make Khan more survivable and ultimately buff his impact over the course of the match. The heal itself going up is fine, I guess. I don't see the point, but it's also such a small change. Another change that appears small but isn't is the buff to the repeater. Khan's damage going to 210 will actually put his damage at the highest it's ever been. Is this another effect of nothing dying in the Haven veteran meta? Who knows. If these changes go through, you should definitely be wary of Khan next patch. He's already good, and these changes just make him better. Next is some nerfs for Lilith. The Blood Cannon card, which cuts your white HP but increases your blood HP, is getting a scaling nerf going from 250 to 200. This card is in every Lilith build, and nearly capped out at that. The reason for that is that Lilith needs her blood HP to cast abilities, so the more of it she has, the more abilities she gets to use. If you neglect to pick this card, Lilith feels so much worse to play. In my eyes, if a certain talent or card is required for a champion to be playable, then I think that should be put in the base kit. I host that mentality when it comes to the Blood Cannon card. Nerfing it is fair, sure, but I think it'd be more interesting if the card was implemented into Lilith's base kit to allow for more loadout variety. Another change is the Blood HP regen during the Blood Moon Ultimate. That's being lowered from 525 a second to 475 health a second. It's a small change, but it will cut down on Lilith's survivability, which is the overall goal with these changes, so I guess that's fine. 7 is up next with even more nerfs. First, the Explosive Dodge. The mine's range has been lowered from 35 units to 30, and the damage per blast has been lowered from 250 to 200. This is accompanied with nerfs to the cooldown reduction cards on both Hook and Bombs, with the base cooldown reduction being lowered from 1 to half a second on both cards. To further cut down on the hypermobility comes a nerf to the spring-loaded talent, with the cooldown reduction on Explosive Dodge being cut from 35 to 30%. As if that wasn't enough, the heavy SMG has had some nerfs with the range on both auto and burst fire being lowered. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I think all of these changes shouldn't have gone through at once. Since losing the ability to hook players, 7 suffers from only having one viable playstyle, and that's hypermobility via spring-loaded. I would have liked to see some buffs towards his other 2 talents, or buffs to some underused cards, instead of gutting the only strong aspect the character still has. I think 7 has a really cool concept and character design, so it saddens me that he's probably going to fall to the wayside. Now for the biggest winner of the patch, and surprisingly, it's Skye. First up, she has a new passive, Shadow Walker. Whenever Skye enters stealth, she gains a 30% move speed boost. To compensate for the passive, the Preparation talent will no longer provide a move speed boost during hidden, and instead it will refill your ammo. But that's not all, because now the smokescreen has 2 charges to it, but the cooldown is going up from 12 to 14 seconds. First off, I am so excited for the new passive. This is a change that I and many others have suggested for years at this point. Now Skye will actually be able to move around like a flanker. The 2 smoke bombs will further boost this effect. If you have the Dissipate card, Skye will move super fast now since it's being added onto the Shadow Walker passive. Skye will still have the Illuminate problem, but now she will be more likely to escape a bad engagement since she has the added move speed. I'm most excited to play Skye with Smoke and Dagger, now that we have 2 smoke bombs. I would have preferred to have the stealth nerf reverted on Smoke and Dagger, but I'm happy with what we got. In my opinion, Skye might be a sleeper pick next patch. She did recently get her damage falloff buffed, on top of the slight cooldown reduction to hidden. All of these buffs add up, so we'll have to wait and see where Skye lands. Next is Shaolin. First, his HP is going up from 2000 to 2150, and on top of that, the longbow's draw time is being lowered from 1 to 0.9 seconds. Even though it's a small 10% fire rate buff, Shaolin absolutely does not need buffs. Even though he's not a popular pick, in my opinion, he is one of the strongest damage champions right now, with 2 of the strongest talents in the game. With Sandtrap, he possesses the highest non-headshot boosted single hit damage with 1300 damage, on top of a 1-second cripple. And with Desert Silence, he can silence people longer than Torvald, and from range. The dev's reason for these changes is very questionable. Shaolin can be powerful, but generally suffers from being a difficult champion to master, and as such, doesn't see much play. I'm sorry, but buffing a champion solely for the fact that they're difficult to play is a horrible explanation. With the fire rate buff, comboed with the recurve talent, Shaolin will be able to fire once every 0.675 seconds for a DPS of 1481. If these changes go through, I'm dropping Amani for Shaolin. He's just a much better version of her at this point. Second to last is Torvald with some recharge nerfs. The passive shield count is being lowered from 3000 to 2500, and the regen amount from using the ability is going from 3000 to 2750. I actually think these are fair changes. Even though I like Torvald, I think his changes from last patch were a bit much. The proposed values here are a nice happy medium, and are still a buff over his pre-emergence numbers. Last up is Willow. Oh my gosh, finally, let's see what she's got. Faith Light now refills your ammo after casting. Oh. I mean, that's nice. It is. It's a nice quality of life. They misspelled Willow in the thought bubble. Willow's problem in my eyes is that her damage is much lower when compared to other blasters. Betty, Dredge, and Drogos all host higher damage numbers, while having similar fire rates. Because of this, Willow's only usable talent is Blast Flower, since it eventually buffs her damage to proper blaster levels. I do hope in the future we see some weapon buffs to Willow, but I guess we'll take what we can get. Unfortunately, this patch doesn't have any reverts to those extremely questionable support changes. Possible video in the future. Nor does it host any changes to Haven or Veteran, so I guess we're dealing with that for a little while longer. Overall, I cannot complain too much about these proposed changes. The only ones I really take issue with are Cassie and Shaolin. But that being said, I really hope we continue to see more mid-update balance adjustments. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a really nice change of pace. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on these changes. Let me know down below. I would also like to state that there is a post where you could leave your feedback on these changes on the Paladins subreddit. No, not r/Paladins with 300,000 users. It's r/Paladins game with only 3,000 users. Topic for another day. With all that being said, I'm YellowNinja, and I'm off to train on some Shaolin. Peace.